Good evening. Welcome to AC Transit's Transit Talks. My name is Beverly Green, Executive Director of External Affairs, Marketing, and Communications at AC Transit. Transit Talks is an opportunity for AC Transit's leadership team to share community updates on bus service, who we serve, and our plans for the future as we all navigate our way out of this pandemic. Our agenda for the evening is simple. We will hear opening remarks from members of the AC Transit Board of Directors. We will then move into a presentation of approximately 45 minutes, which will be delivered by key members of the AC Transit team. We will have 3 live polls sprinkled throughout the evening to help us understand how you are thinking about your future plans for travel to and from work, school, or other activities. Next, I would like to introduce 2 AC Transit Board directors that are in attendance tonight, the Honorable Jovanka Beckles and the Honorable Chris Peoples. Jovanka Beckles is serving her first term, having been elected to the AC Transit Board of Directors in November 2020 to represent Ward 1. Ward 1 covers the cities and unincorporated communities of West Contra, Costa County, and portions of Northern Alameda County, representing the cities of Albany, El Cerrito, Richmond, San Pablo, and a portion of Berkeley, as well as the unincorporated communities of El Sobrante, Kensington, and North Richmond. Director Beckles, born in Panama City, Panama, attended Florida A&M, where she graduated cum laude with a bachelor's degree in psychology and later earned her Master of Business Administration degree from the University of Phoenix. Prior to joining the AC Transit Board, she served as a member of the Richmond City Council for 2 terms. I would like to welcome Board Director Jovanka Beckles to share opening remarks. Director Beckles.
Thank you very much, Ms. Green. I appreciate that introduction. Good evening, everyone, and I thank you so much for taking the time to join us this evening. I truly look forward to hearing your feedback, and I also want to just take this opportunity to thank the staff for the great job they've done in organizing this forum for our community. My name is Jovanka Beckles, as Ms. Green said, one of the newest AC Transit Board members. I was elected in November of 2020 to represent Ward 1, which is West Contra Costa County. AC Transit is governed by an elected board that consists of 5 ward directors and 2 at-large directors. Meetings are held on the 2nd and the 4th Wednesday of each month at 5 o'clock on Zoom, and of course, it's open to the public. Prior, though, to joining the AC Transit Board, as mentioned by Beverly, I served 2 terms as a Richmond City Council member, where I helped pass a suite of progressive reforms to help make positive changes in my city of Richmond. I'm also a longtime activist in the Richmond Progressive Alliance, East Bay DSA, children's mental health professional, and a former candidate for California's 15th State Assembly. I decided to run for AC Transit Board at the urging of the AC Transit workers, represented by ATU, which is the Amalgamated Transit Union, Local 192. Very, very proud of my long record of public service, fighting for the people of my community. As a board member, my priority and commitment is to work with riders and workers to build a universally accessible, emission-free transit system that the public deserves. Tonight, you'll hear a presentation by AC Transit staff. We'll have time at the end of the presentation for questions and answers. My hope is that you'll find this evening's meeting informative and that you will be able to share your questions and comments with us. I thank you for taking the time once again for joining me and my AC Transit colleagues to learn what's happening as we attempt to navigate a service recovery path forward. Thank you so much. I'll now turn it over to my fellow board member, Director at Large, Chris Peoples.
Thank you, Jovanka. My name is Chris Peoples. I'm one of the 2 at-large directors, and as such, I help back up the ward directors when they need help. I've spent a lot of time in Contra Costa County, starting back when Mim Holly was the director. And then after that, when Joe was the director, he had difficult work schedules, so I was often filling in up there. You're very lucky to have Jovanka as your director. as she indicated, she's got lots of political experience up there in Richmond, having served on the Richmond City Council for 2 terms. And she has brought a whole bunch of new people into the discussion and the dialogue. One of the problems that I've worked on for close to 40 years is that the AAA and Chevron and people who promote individual automobile use are always there in person and in numbers. And lately we've had a whole lot of bicycle folks who are great folks, but they show up and they advocate for themselves. But people who ride the bus tend to be people who have multiple jobs and don't necessarily have the latest technology to set up Zoom meetings and, set up Slack meetings to arrange things and all that. And so having new people come in, both from DSA and from the East Bay Bus Riders Union, has been very helpful. They advocate in front of us, but they also advocate for us in places like MTC, which is a pretty much unknown organization that controls hundreds of billions of dollars. So that's great. I encourage you this evening to listen to everybody, but to listen particularly to our planning director, Robert Del Rosario. We're going to be talking about a relook at the network, not necessarily, we're going to bring back service as we were able to in the pre-pandemic network, but what should the network look like after the pandemic? And there's going to be a whole series of meetings, and I would encourage all of you to get on the mailing list for those meetings and to participate in the meetings and let us know what you think. But anyway, thank you. I'll turn it over to Mike Hirsch. Mike is our general manager. I've worked with 5 general managers during my time at AC Transit, and Mike is by far the best.
Thank you, Director Peoples, for those kind words. Thank you, Director Beckles. Excellent to have you on the board. Look forward to working with you for many years. As mentioned, my name is Mike Hirsch. I'm the general manager here at AC Transit. I've been here a little over 5.5 years. Before I get into my formal presentation, I want to take a moment to recognize our frontline workers who are truly heroic. Our ridership, all ridership in public transit has suffered, ours less than some others, because our ridership is truly transit dependent, particularly during a pandemic. If it was not for our operators, mechanics, service employees, folks that service the buses, our field supervisors, we would not have been able to put out the service that we did and will continue to do as we emerge out of this pandemic. So I just want to thank the team. And also, this is our last of 6 transit talks. I want to thank the team that put this together. I think you'll be interested to hear what we have tonight. It's been a Herculean effort behind the scenes. We've had good feedback so far. There'll be a survey at the end of the offer to you at the end of the Zoom presentation tonight. Please take advantage of that. Again, thank you for joining us tonight and for your continued support as we work to restore and rebuild service in the 13 cities and 8 unincorporated areas of Alameda and Contra Costa counties. We pride ourselves as being the 3rd largest public bus system in California and third largest transit agency in the San Francisco Bay Area. During most of the pandemic, we actually moved up into the 2nd spot. I never in my career thought that AC Transit would carry more people than Bart. We're neck and neck right now, and we're proud that both of our agencies are seeing ridership return. We know our service is critical to the regional economy. Our trans-based service across the Bay Bridge, San Mateo Bridge, Dumbarton Bridge had surpassed 15,000 average daily riders. Can you imagine if those were people in single occupant automobiles? We surpassed 15,000 average daily riders before the pandemic, and it was the service that had consistently shown year-over-year growth. We were also getting 30,000 students to school daily. Whether you're a rider, a business owner, an elected official, and even if you drive, I guarantee you that anything that impacts AC Transit in one way or another impacts you as well. Prior to March 2020, we carried approximately 189,000 weekday riders and more than 53 million riders annually. As of last week, our ridership is still down 60%, starting to come up. Compared to pre-pandemic levels, again, we're at 60% and seeing an uptick. Our Transbay ridership has been severely impacted due to people working from home and not commuting. But the pandemic will not last forever. And when the economy reopens, we'll continue playing a critical role in the Bay Area's transportation network, connecting with 16 other public and private bus systems, 25 BART stations, 6 Amtrak stations, and 4 ferry terminals. And when Alameda's Seaplane Lagoon Ferry Terminal opens later this year, we'll connect to that ferry terminal as well. While our overall ridership today is a fraction of what it was before the pandemic, we continue providing a critical service, in particular for those that have continued to ride during the pandemic. AC Transit has always been a lifeline for many, and our service has always been a critical component of the fabric of many communities. Ensuring the sustainability of AC Transit service is truly a matter of equity, given that 65% of our riders are low income and 75% are people of color. A rider survey conducted during the pandemic revealed that those still riding are dependent on our service. 40% were making essential trips to work, to school, to medical appointments, to get groceries, etc. 15% identified as essential workers. 43% indicated they don't have access to a car. Today, AC Transit's ridership is bouncing between number 2 and number 3 in the Bay Area, carrying more riders than BART on some days, and on average weekdays second only to Muni. During the pandemic, AC Transit staff has been hard at work every day getting service on the road. As I mentioned, our frontline workers, the bus operators, mechanics, road supervisors, cleaning staff, fueling staff have come to work every day getting essential workers where they needed to go. And behind the scenes, the AC Transit staff has been busy all year long on a variety of key projects, including Tempo, our bus rapid transit service. The first in the East Bay was launched in August of 2020 in the middle of the pandemic. Tempo runs along a 9.5-mile route through the cities of Oakland and San Leandro, with 10-minute headways and buses traveling 80% of the route in dedicated bus-only lanes. We're seeing on-time performance levels above 84%, unheard of in the Bay Area. Innovative technology has been added to assist our riders. Our IT and marketing and communications departments have been focused on developing technologies aimed at improving the rider experience. This year, we launched our first ever official mobile app. The app offers ACT real-time information where your bus is and when it will be at your stop. We've introduced a new contactless fare payment option using your phone. It also has access to AC Transit's customer service functions. Additionally, we launched a new rider capacity feature, which offers riders real-time information about bus capacity levels. We look forward to relaxing social distancing sometime in the June timeframe. We know that our buses are crowded. We know that we pass people up. We are terribly sorry for that. But we hope the rider capacity feature helps you better plan your trip and eases with that difficult pandemic problem. We launched a new website earlier this year and completed a full renovation of our customer service center in downtown Oakland, which is now open to the public. In March, we were named the Employer of the Year by the San Francisco Bay Area chapter of the Women's Transportation Seminar in recognition of our commitment to the advancement of women in the transportation industry. In January, AC Transit joined the Clipper Start program, a pilot program offering a 20% discount to eligible low-income riders. On March 1st, we launched an all-door boarding pilot on 2 lines, the 6 and the 51B, to help speed up boarding by allowing riders paying with Clipper to board and tag their Clipper card at the rear door therefore speeding up the boarding process and improving reliability. In 2020, we introduced battery electric buses to our fleet, adding to our current zero-emission fleet of hydrogen fuel cell buses. And when federal and state officials announced they would establish a mass vaccination site at the Oakland Coliseum, we answered the call by providing free shuttle service to more than 3,800 residents to their vaccine appointment. Despite the challenges of the pandemic, we've remained committed to advancing projects to improve the rider experience and better serve our customers. We are already seeing evidence of change that is forcing all of us to plan and operate differently. And AC Transit, we're doing just that, adjusting, innovating, doing our best to respond to the needs of riders as travel patterns continue evolving. Staff has prepared a couple of live polls tonight to receive instant feedback that will help our planners in their efforts to build a bus network that is responsive to the needs of our community. In fact, we have our first live poll right now. Can we get the first poll up on the screen, please? For those of you on the phone, the question is, how will you travel once you return to work, school, or other activities? And the choices are drive alone, carpool, take public transit, take Uber or Lyft, bike, walk, or mix it up. We have a timer. We have about 35 seconds left to respond. Again, the question is, how will you travel once you return to work, school, or other activities? Drive alone, carpool, public transit, take Uber and Lyft, otherwise known as transportation network companies, bike, walk, or mix it up. So we love that. We love Ward 1. Thank you. The first answer with 50% of the respondents, 11 respondents, is public transit. No carpool. And I'll just let you know, I don't think in any of the talks have we seen any carpool. We find that very interesting. No Uber and Lyft, 0%. No bike, 0%. No walking, 0%. Very interesting. The only other two choices, mix it up. We had 9 respondents, which represents 41%, and drive alone, 2 respondents at 9%. Again, very interesting data. And I thank you very much for this. We'll have future polls here coming up tonight. But now I will hand it over to Nichelle Lanes, who will speak about AC Transit's commitment to health and safety. Thank you again.
Thank you, General Manager Hirsch. Good evening. I'm Nichelle, and I am the Acting Director of Marketing Communications. And I'm pleased to speak with you about the safety measures AC Transit has in place to continue to provide you with a safe ride. In accordance with state and county mandates, AC Transit has taken a proactive approach to ensure safety and wellness measures for riders and operators. I want to emphasize and remind everyone that AC Transit, since the beginning of the pandemic, has and continues to require face coverings while riding on our buses. To aid in this requirement, mask and hand sanitizer personal protective equipment, or PPEs, are available on every bus for our riders, and those stations are refilled daily. Signage on every bus reminds riders to maintain a 6-foot social distance and to wear face coverings correctly. Our buses are cleaned and fogged each day with the disinfectant. All of our operators currently use the positive airflow ventilation procedure implemented during the COVID-19 pandemic. This procedure requires all windows to be closed, the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, or HVAC, on, and the rear roof hatch placed in the fully opened position. This pushes particulates through the roof hatch and refreshes onboard air 50 times an hour. Additionally, our maintenance department created a COVID shield for each bus. This latching shield encloses the operator for more protection from the spread of COVID-19. Finally, buses will have a COVID limit line on the floor near the operator to ensure a social distance between riders and operators. So one of the challenges of social distancing on our buses, and the general manager has talked about this during his slide deck, is a significant reduction in the rider loads that we can typically carry. Currently, we are limited to about 25% of our normal bus loads, between 10 and 24 riders, depending on the bus type. As AC Transit complies with the CDC guidance on rider capacity that is current, when our rider capacity has been reached, we must make the difficult decision of not onboarding additional riders. We realize that with fewer seats available due to these social distancing requirements, knowing the bus occupancy levels as you plan your trip is a critical factor in successfully navigating our system in this unprecedented time and beyond. To that end, our innovation and technology team added a new feature to assist our riders within our ACT real-time bus arrival predictor. The rider capacity feature enables riders to view real-time bus capacities by line. Additionally, once a bus has reached its capacity, our operators reach out to our Operations Control Center, or OCC, to send out another bus to ease overcrowding. I'm now going to turn it over to AC Transit's Chief Financial Officer, Chris Andrzejczyk, who will present on the topic, emergency funding for public transit.
Thank you, Nichelle. As she mentioned, I'm Chris Andrzejczyk. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for AC Transit. I manage all aspects of the district's finances and make sure that we have the funds we need to provide our essential services to the public. Tonight, I'll offer a high-level overview of AC Transit's financial condition and how we're getting through the pandemic. Excuse me. We are very fortunate to have received emergency federal funding, but I want to be clear that the funding we've received, the emergency federal funding we've received so far has been a lifeline and has replaced the operating funds we've lost during the pandemic as ridership has plummeted. It is unfortunately not additional funding. It's emergency funding that has kept us afloat. AC Transit received $114 million from the initial Pandemic CARES Act in the middle of last calendar year. We used $30 million to fill in revenue losses in our last fiscal year, and the remaining $84 million to fill in revenue losses for this current fiscal year. Looking at our next fiscal year, we don't think the economy will be back to normal, nor do we think our regular revenues will have quite returned in full for the next fiscal year. We will be using the second federal aid package, known as the CRISA Act, to fill in the $56 million in revenue losses we project for next fiscal year. Able to balance our budget thanks to the federal aid we've received, and also because we've reduced expenses and are providing, unfortunately, at this point, just 75% of the service we would normally provide. Prior to the pandemic, AC Transit was in a pretty good financial position. What has helped us in this pandemic is that AC Transit has a more diverse revenue source mix. A combination of sales taxes, property taxes, parcel tax, fare box revenues, bridge toll funds, more sources than many other agencies. The property owners in most of AC Transit service area pay $8 per month in parcel tax to support our essential service. We are extremely grateful that voters have continued to support this measure through the years. Stable funding like that has helped keep our revenues from dropping as much as other agencies, such as Bart, Caltrain, Golden Gate Transit, and Muni, agencies that depend much more on fare box revenues to run their business. The chart on the right shows different types of revenues that a selection of different agencies receive. I know the print's a little bit small, but the point of the chart really is just through the colors to show that all agencies in the Bay Area, and this is a selection of some of them, have different revenue source mixes, and so we've all fared a little bit differently through the pandemic. And for those of you on the phone, this slide has a very colorful bar chart that just shows the things that I've pointed out. So it's hard to predict what will happen with the economy and with transit ridership looking forward. What we're experiencing now is not a normal recession. However, based on prior recessions, we do think it could take a couple years before employment levels reach what they were before the pandemic. Since March of last year, many jobs have moved from the office and into our homes. We are hearing and expecting that work from home or outside of the office workplace will continue to some degree for those that can, which will mean reduced Transbay and even local ridership. We are doing our best, but cannot control when people might return to transit, particularly if they have other transportation choices. We are fortunate and grateful to have received 2 rounds of emergency federal aid to support our operations so far. This federal funding has been critical in stopping the bleeding, but it has not made us whole. President Biden recently signed the American Rescue Plan Act into law, which will provide a 3rd round of federal aid. At this time, we still do not know how much we will be receiving from this. However, an emergency federal aid will not continue forever. So we must plan for a service level that we can support when our regular revenues, once the federal aid runs out. Next, we'll talk about how we plan for future service. But before that, we have another poll for you to participate in. So this poll is asking how many days per week you will be commuting once the pandemic winds down and we get back to something near normalcy. So the answers on the screen are: I will work or attend school from home. I will be commuting 0 days, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 or more days, and I don't know. All right, the answers are in, and first place, 23% is 5 or more days. That's probably the highest number we've had come out first in one of these polls. Second place, 19% is I don't know. Then 0 days. Then we have 2 days and 3 days tied. And then I will work or attend school from home, and 4 days tied. And then coming in last is 1 day. With that, I will turn it over to Robert Del Rosario.
Thanks, Chris. Good evening, everyone. As Chris mentioned, my name is Robert Del Rosario, and I'm the Director of Service Development and Planning for AC Transit. I will discuss our current and future plans for service recovery and restoration. At the onset of the pandemic and the shelter in place, AC Transit immediately reduced service to 65% service levels because of a significant drop in ridership, down 74% at the onset, and concerns over the potential lack of available workforce, including bus operators. Fortunately, due to federal funding, we were able to increase and sustain service levels at 75%, with ridership increasing to 40% of pre-pandemic. The increase was to primarily bring back our trunk and major corridor routes up to pre-pandemic service levels. We've also been able to make recent minor additions, particularly with the start of some supplementary school routes in response to the reopening of schools last month. In addition to implementing incremental service increases, we are also starting the planning and analysis for a full restoration and a new network. However, there are 3 key factors to service recovery. 1 is available funds, 2 is available resources, particularly bus operators, and 3 is understanding of ridership patterns. Chris gave you an update on the budget and our financial situation. With regard to operators, we do need to hire and train operators along with all of the other transit operators in the region. We were very fortunate during the pandemic to not lay off operators, but some operators did retire or attrit the agency. And so we have to bring those operators back or bring new operators into the system. CDC guidelines and Cal OSHA regulations limit the number of operators we can train, and meeting hiring demand in the region could be an issue as all transit operators try to increase service. Therefore, we need to explore creative solutions to increase our operator throughput, and we're looking at those as we speak. We'll also need to collect customer travel data via outreach, surveys, and other data sources, whether it's traffic patterns. Cell phone data is a popular way to collect travel patterns these days. And we'll look at those things in the coming months so that we can plan a new network. The goal is to implement a new service network that responds to the new normal by August of 2022. Along the way, we plan to engage in robust outreach to inform the planning efforts, board approvals, and implementation of the network plan. However, I do want to emphasize that the August 2022 target is for a new route network. AC Transit will be able to reactivate suspended service at any time before then, as funding and resources allow. We're looking to add some service in the southern Alameda County area in June. We intend to bring back a vast majority of school service in August if schools fully reopen, which it looks like they will. And we hope to start some pilot service later this year. The general manager mentioned Seaplane Lagoon in Alameda. I saw a question or multiple questions about the Ashby corridor and bringing back service there. And we're looking at a potential pilot to start that service back up. And then there's the connections between Chabot College and the South Hayward BART station, which need to be improved. Next slide. So in terms of our existing network, I would like to share what's going on with lines that serve northern Alameda and western Contra Costa counties. This first map shows the heart of AC Transit's service network in Berkeley and surrounding neighborhoods. This includes downtown Berkeley and service around campus. Outside of Oakland, this is where we see the bulk of our ridership and where we brought back the most service to pre-pandemic levels. Those services less on the weekends, particularly in the Berkeley Hills. Next slide. We also acknowledge that Line 80 in South Berkeley continues to be suspended due to limited resources and low demand before the pandemic. We are currently exploring a pilot, as I mentioned, to return service on the Ashby corridor and have it a new destination so that it's better serving the riders along the corridor. Also note that in this area, as in most of our service area, we have suspended many peak Transbay routes due to low demand and an unknown future of Transbay commute patterns, though we are seeing some ridership growth on Transbay service that we do operate today. We are strategizing on how to bring back Transbay lines as demand grows and job places reopen. Next slide. Our service network continues north into West Contra Costa County through the cities of El Cerrito and Richmond. The network is anchored by our service along San Pablo Avenue, where ridership demand has been high even through the pandemic. As a result, this is one of the corridors where we restored full service back to pre-pandemic levels. We also have key transit hubs at the Richmond BART station, Contra Costa College, Richmond Parkway Transit Center, Del Norte BART, and Plaza BART. While all routes are operating, we eventually want to bring back more evening and nighttime service, particularly on the local routes as resources will allow. So back to a more detailed overview of the plan to reach a new network in August of 2022. The process will include multiple outreach points for information gathering, plan feedback and implementation, with plan development in between those moments. Initiating this process with the Transit Talks meetings series, which we're having today, and this informs the public of our recovery status and plans to seek public feedback. This will be our final Transit Talk meeting, and we'll use the data collected at this meeting and others to help us with our network planning. In the fall, we plan to conduct another round of more in-depth outreach to get an idea of travel patterns and customer needs. Information from our outreach will feed our planning process to develop a new route network. Once staff develops a draft new network proposal, we will set a public hearing for final public feedback and engagement and board approval in spring of 2022. If we have an approved plan, we will then commence public outreach to inform our riders and the public of the service changes scheduled for August of 2022. This brings us to our third and final live poll question. And the question is, help AC Transit set its priorities for recovery. What actions should come first? The first, in no particular order, is improve service to disadvantaged communities. The second is improve service on major transit lines where ridership is highest. The third is increase service to cover as much of the service area as possible. And the last but not least is restore Transbay service. So as with the other Transit Talk polls that we held in other geographic areas, there is a balance of responses here. The first, or the most popular response was improved service to disadvantaged communities at 38%. Next, at 31%, was improved service on major transit lines where ridership is highest. Closely behind that at 27% is increased service to cover as much of the service area as possible. And then with 4% of the votes, restore Transbay service. This concludes my section of the presentation, and thank you for taking the live poll. I will turn it back to our General Manager, Michael Hirsch. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Good job there. Good evening again. Thank you for your attention. We'll start the Q&A portion shortly. I'd like to share some project updates with you that are not related to the pandemic, but are important to our future operations. Since 2000, AC Transit has been building the most comprehensive zero-emission bus program in the United States, or ZEBs, as we call them, initially focused on hydrogen fuel cell technology and most recently expanded to include battery electric vehicles, making our zero-emission program one of the most sophisticated programs in the country. Today, all of our zero-emission buses are prioritized to serve our most disadvantaged communities, which are also the most impacted by environmental factors. We are currently running a side-by-side comparison of hydrogen fuel cell, our battery electric bus, in addition to conventional diesel hybrid, and our older legacy fuel cell buses. The study will offer detailed comparisons of each technology's performance, reliability, fuel efficiency, capital, and operating costs. All transit agencies in California are required to operate a 100% zero-emission bus fleet by the year 2040. And in many ways, we're ahead of the curve compared to other agencies in the state. However, our challenges will be securing the funding needed to upgrade our facilities and build the infrastructure needed to adequately accommodate a 100% zero-emission fleet. That's over 540 buses in our fleet. We currently have several corridor projects underway, which are aimed at enhancing operations and improving service reliability along the Telegraph, Grand, West Grand, San Pablo, and Dumbarton corridors. These projects include installation of transit signal priority, or TSP. That equipment allows our buses to communicate with traffic signals for faster travel along these corridors and to give buses priority at intersections. In conjunction, we're relocating some bus stops from near side to far side. That means from the near side of the intersection to across the intersection to prevent our buses from being stuck at traffic lights and to improve access to the curb. Additionally, we're installing ADA access improvements where needed and where possible. Lastly, we're actively engaged at the state legislative level to help legislation that prioritizes transit on our streets and highways. Former Assembly member, now Attorney General Rob Bonta, introduced a bill that will improve transit service into and out of San Francisco by installing a transit-only lane on the Bay Bridge. With Bonta's confirmation as State Attorney General, Assemblywoman member Buffy Wicks has agreed to carry this bill. If passed into law, the bill will play an important first step in helping to improve the reliability of our Trans-Bay service, which is frequently bogged down in traffic jams. Through the Blue Ribbon Transit Recovery Task Force, AC Transit is working with other Bay Area transit agencies to coordinate service planning, operations, communications, and our response to the pandemic. I want everyone to know tonight, we are hiring bus operators. Mr. Del Rosario talked about how, and Mr. Andrzejczyk talked about how our ability to bring back operators, we didn't lay any off, but we lost them through normal attrition, retirement. It takes at least 3 months to train an operator. These are living wage, union jobs with excellent benefits. If you are looking for work or you know someone looking for work, I urge anyone to go to actransit.org/careers and read about and consider applying for the jobs we have. We desperately need bus operators, and we are competing with the entire Bay Area who are also hiring bus operators. Back to some of the efforts on the Blue Ribbon Transit Recovery. The work includes improving regional connectivity, improving the customer experience, particularly as it relates to travel on multiple systems, and focusing on equity to make sure that the region's transit network is accessible and affordable to all. I'll conclude my remarks here and hand the mic back over to Beverly to introduce the Q&A segment of Transit Talks. Again, thank you for being here.
Thank you, General Manager Hirsch, and thank you to all the presenters. We recognize that was a lot of information, but we thought it was important to share with you not only the ways in which we have been impacted by the pandemic and our response, but also to highlight the other key initiatives that we have been focused on during the pandemic, all of which are aimed at improving service quality, reliability, and the rider experience. With that, we are now ready to transition to the question and answer portion of the program. And to our audience, thank you for your patience. We will begin the Q&A session with one of the questions we received prior to the meeting. And the first question is for Robert Del Rosario from Service Planning. In what ways can local city councils better partner with AC Transit and its board directors?
Thanks, Beverly. That's a great question. And I think there's two primary ways. One of the things that we ought to keep in mind is that AC Transit operates on city streets primarily. We don't own any right of way. We operate the service and we own the service. So we're just like any other mode of transportation where we get stuck in traffic and we need to adhere to a schedule. But we can carry lots of people. If we can carry lots of people reliably and the cities can help us with getting transit priority, getting through intersections, having dedicated transit lanes, accessible bus stops, I think that's a great way that we could partner. I think the other piece of this is that cities have a lot of say in development. And anytime that we can intensify development around transit-oriented development, it can happen around trains, but it can also happen around buses. And so as much as we can partner with cities on development requirements, getting easy passes to the residents so they can ride the bus pretty seamlessly, and making sure that there's good bus service to the locations where development happens. I think those are the two key things that we could really do well in terms of partnerships with cities.
Thank you, Robert. And actually, I'd like to acknowledge one other person. Igor Tregu is on the AC Transit Parcel Tax Committee. Welcome, Igor. This is our second question for the General Manager, Michael Hirsch. How can AC Transit protect drivers and passengers without a vaccine requirement?
Well, first, I'd like to encourage everybody to get their vaccine, but I understand there's some hesitancy. We will continue to offer masks and hand sanitizer to the public. We were one of the first agencies to do so on all of our buses. We will continue to do that for the foreseeable future. You may have heard today that the CDC relaxed some mask guidelines. We will not be relaxing mask requirements for either our employees or our passengers. Actually, a TSA requirement for public transit. We will continue to have those available, and we'll continue to ask the public to utilize them. We installed the barriers on all the buses to help keep distance between the operator and the passengers. Those barriers will remain on the buses. As we purchase new buses, we're actually looking, we're committed to provide a factory produced barrier that also helps reduce operator assaults. We've configured the buses for maximum airflow. We actually even did smoke tests on the buses to figure out the best air conditioner and roof vent configuration that gets the maximum airflow through the bus. We are installing a limit line. As we reduce social distancing, we will still require that there be 6 foot distance away from the operator, including the shield. We've for our employees, we've had on-site vaccination. We partnered with Rite Aid. I know there's hesitancy. I got the J&J. I had COVID and I'm still here. So I encourage everybody. I still think that's the safest solution. I have confidence in it, but we respect it's an individual's choice, both for our employees and our passengers, and we'll keep the PPE and wish the best for folks that don't get the vaccine.
Thank you. This is a question for Chris Andrzejczyk, our CFO. Will AC Transit add more buses in our area or get rid of the passenger limits now that more people in the Bay Area are vaccinated?
Thank you, Beverly, for the question. This is Chris Andrzejczyk, the CFO. So we are looking at being able to increase passenger loads on our buses as we move forward. Unfortunately, it's not going to be right yet, but likely in June, we are going to be able to start carrying more passengers on our buses. And we would certainly like to increase service in many places. I'm not sure the question didn't really specify where, but as we come out of the pandemic and we, our funding comes back to a little bit better level, we are certainly looking to restore service that we had cut.
Thank you. This is a question for Nichelle Lanes of Marketing and Communications, and this question came in on the Spanish line. And the question is, how can youth obtain a bus pass? Nichelle?
Thank you, Beverly. Thank you, Beverly. I'm going to talk about both adult and youth bus passes because I think the question may have involved both. And thank you for reaching out to us on the Spanish line. So for both youth, I'll start with youth. For youth passes, we offer discounted fares for youth and senior disabled riders that are roughly about half the price of an adult fare. You can pay cash, a youth or senior can pay cash on the bus at a discounted rate. You can also get a pass, a 31-day pass, a day pass, and show proof of eligibility for that pass through Clipper. So we offer passes through Clipper, our regional fare partner. You turn in a form, you get approval, you become eligible, and then you can use that discounted card on any Clipper enabled agency throughout the Bay Area, and also receive a discounted pass that way. For adults, you also can pay cash on the bus. You can also get a pass on a Clipper card, day pass you can get on the bus. You can also get a day pass on the Clipper card. You can also get a pass using our, you can pay with cash as an adult through our mobile technology. So we allow, or we just started this recently during the pandemic, the ability to pay with your mobile device. And you can also use Clipper Start, which is a discounted fare program that the general manager mentioned in his presentation deck that offers discounted cash fares for adults who meet specific income thresholds. So there are a number of ways to ride AC Transit. And in the coming weeks, there will be even more. Clipper also allows, it has enabled mobile payment on Apple iOS devices. We expect to see Android come really, really soon. And we also are going to be offering more options on our own mobile platform, in addition to adult fares. And we hope to see discounted fares also come for youth, senior, and disabled through that fare channel as well.
Thank you, Michelle. This is a question for Robert Del Rosario. What are you doing to restore service that was cut during the pandemic, particularly line 80 along Ashby Avenue? That's the line that serves West Berkeley and the Ashby Bart station, which is also the site of future transit-oriented housing. Robert?
Thanks, Beverly. As I mentioned, we're at 75% service levels, and we're going to incrementally increase as resources allow. And some of those services that we're going to bring back will be the ones that have been cut during the pandemic. So we're looking specifically at line 80. We know that Ashby is a key east-west corridor in the Berkeley, Oakland area. And it's had service for years and years and years, probably decades. One of the challenges we had pre-pandemic is that with line 80, we didn't get a whole lot of ridership. The productivity of the route wasn't the strongest. So we're going to look at what can we do with connecting the Ashby corridor to a better route anchor, possibly Emeryville. And so having service on Ashby and then travel across Emeryville to where there's more retail, commercial activity, other residential activity. We plan to bring the pilot proposal to our board at our next board meeting in May. And if approval from the board comes, then as resources pick up, we can then implement that pilot. So definitely on our radar, just monitoring our resources and trying to figure out the best ways to bring back service that is effective.
Robert, if I could just add to your answer, again, it's Mike Hirsch, the general manager. I know people want to know what date is my bus going to be back in service, and I apologize that we cannot tell you that. I go back to urging you, if you know people that are looking for a good living wage job that can take care of your family forever, apply for positions at AC Transit as fast as we can bring bus operators on. And we fight for our share of the American Recovery Plan dollars, the more service we can add back. I would love to see us come out of the pandemic with more than service before pre-pandemic. We need to fight for those dollars. We're going to continue to fight in Sacramento and particularly Washington, D.C. for more dollars. But there is a critical path to how fast we can hire, and that takes a long time. As I mentioned, 3 months. Then we have to build a schedule. We have to have board approval and eventually deploy it. So bear with us. We will communicate frequently and as transparently as we can on how soon or when we can restore service.
Thank you, General Manager Hirsch. This is a question for Cecil Blandon, who is a director of maintenance. So while he comes onto the screen, I'm going to ask the question. I see that there are masks and sanitizer on the bus. Do drivers replace the masks and the sanitizer when it's all gone?
Good evening, Cecil Blandon, Director of Maintenance, and the question to that answer. What takes place is when the mask or sanitizer on board the bus is depleted, the driver will call into our central control, the OCC, and the dispatch will dispatch a road supervisor to try and meet the bus at a layover or as soon as point available to replenish the PPE on board the bus. If that for some reason is not available, at the end of the day, the bus will be replenished. Our field service employees go through every single bus and replenish them on a nightly basis.
Thank you, Cecil. And this is a question from Council Member Xavier for Robert Del Rosario. After ridership increases, do you have plans to increase service on the line 74 to the Richmond Ferry?
Yeah, what we want to do actually is make sure that we're properly timed with the Richmond Ferry. So the Richmond Ferry has decent frequency, and what we want to make sure is that in the morning that 74 gets there, and then 10 minutes later, 12 minutes later, the ferry leaves. That gives you enough time to make that transfer. And then we want to do something similar in the reverse. As the ferry arrives, passengers unload, the 74 will be there to make that connection. I will say that the amount of coordination between transit operators is probably the strongest I've ever seen it, and I've been in this job for quite some time. And so we have very strong relationships with WETA, with Bart, and trying to coordinate these trips is a big priority for us.
Thank you, Robert. This is a question for our General Manager, Michael Hirsch, regarding the zero emission bus program. West Berkeley is impacted with heavy industry pollution and highway pollution. Why are most of the buses used in West Berkeley diesel fuel polluting buses? Although this questioner does acknowledge that they see the hydrogen fuel cell buses more on the weekends, and they thank us for that. Mr. Hirsch?
Yeah, that's a great question. And quite frankly, we can't wait to have more buses up there. The short answer is that we have 23 zero emission buses. There'll be a few down on a typical day for maintenance needs. That's district-wide out of 540 buses. But more importantly, the fueling or charging infrastructure is our Division 2 in Emeryville and our Division 4 Seminary, which is basically in East Oakland area. We have a very robust plan to add the zero emission fueling technology in our Richmond division as we find the funding. It takes several years to bring that on board. We're very proud of the Clean Corridors plan because in Sacramento, it was recognized by various funding agencies because of our commitment to deploy in the communities that are most impacted, particularly by air quality. As a result, we got a grant. So you'll be seeing 50, 52, depends on the price of buses when we actually sign the contract. More zero emission buses coming later this year into next year. So as each year goes by, as we get closer to 2040, you'll see more up there. The short answer again is the infrastructure isn't in Richmond to deploy a lot, but our plan is to update all of our divisions, including D6 at Hayward. It's the only one I haven't told you about, so that we can deploy zero emission buses, but we are committed to deploying them on the most disadvantaged community lines first.
Thank you, General Manager Hirsch. And this is a question for Cecil Blandon from maintenance. Why are all the windows closed on the bus? Why can't we open the windows or the hatch? I hear something about airflow, but shouldn't we open the windows so that we can get fresh air on the bus?
Good evening, Cecil Blandon here, Director of Maintenance. So that's a really good question, and I'm sure that a lot of passengers that ride the bus may come into that experience, and when they try and open a window and they find that the window does not open or does not open in as a normal scenario. So as General Manager Hirsch spoke earlier, the Safety Department and Maintenance, we conduct a test for the airflow inside our buses to identify basically what we call positive ventilation, or the best way for airflow to move inside the bus. When we did our tests, we tested vehicles opening windows, various windows, having the front windows open, the different configurations available in the current fleet. And what we found is that when we have the air conditioning on, which is known as the HVAC, we have the windows closed, and we have the rear roof hatch in the open, fully open position, we create positive ventilation. What is positive ventilation is we're extracting, pushing the inside air out through the roof vent, creating a safe, or we'll say a safer environment for everybody inside the bus. So this method was established, and we went through it to create this environment inside the bus.
Okay, thank you very much. This is a question for Chris Andrzejczyk, the CFO. Have you considered bringing back more retired bus drivers, perhaps part-time at full salary levels, while you are training new drivers in order to increase bus service and yet reduce or at least keep costs low? Chris?
Thank you, Beverly. We actually have considered that. We are really trying to consider anything we can do in the short term to increase the amount of drivers we have so we can bring back more service. We are working on the issue of whether or not we can bring back retired drivers. There's a lot of regulations about retired people coming back into the same job. And we also have a union partner that we need to work with on how that would work. So it is something we are looking at. If we can pull it off and make it work, then we will.
Thank you, Chris. This is a question for Nichelle Lanes of Marketing and Communications. I know I might be late in the game, but how do I get one of those cool Zoom backgrounds you all have? Maybe one that says, I'm an AC Transit rider and I support public transit. Nichelle?
I'm like a proud parent. You don't know how gratified I am to hear this. I think this is the first marketing question we've had during Transit Talk, so I'm thrilled to hear this. We actually have been working on developing more opportunities for our riders to evangelize how great our service is and how to stakeholders and elected officials and community-based organizations. We currently have actually on our website mobile screens, like a mobile background screen and a Zoom background for the 60th anniversary. AC Transit is still currently in its 60th anniversary year. It happened during a pandemic, so our outreach was pretty muted this year, but you can actually download 60th anniversary Zoom backgrounds and mobile phone wallpaper and continue to look on our website. We're going to be doing a lot more of that in the coming year. Opportunities for our riders to download really cool tchotchke, especially digital tchotchke that you can use immediately. So thank you for that feedback, because that we're tracking the same level. So thanks.
Thank you, Nichelle. This is a question for Cecil Blandon. With today's CDC mask guidance, will you stop requiring that riders wear masks?
Cecil Blandon, Director of Maintenance. So the quick answer to that question is no, we will not stop requiring riders to have to wear a mask. That's a mandate from TSA that will be maintained, will be enforced. And we will continue to, the district will continue to provide PPE on board the bus. The hand sanitizer and mask will remain on board our vehicles.
Thank you, Cecil. Now, this is a question from Robert Del Rosario from Planning, and this one is from El Cerrito Mayor Paul Fedeli. Building affordable housing in El Cerrito means some parking spaces at BART stations will be taken out. With geographic challenges in the hill areas, will bus routes still be a priority there, as well as along San Pablo Avenue?
Thanks, Beverly. The short answer is yes. We've been in a lot of discussions with BART and their TOD team on what transit access will look like for stations that develop housing. The two that are prominent are the ones in Plaza BART as well as North Berkeley BART. And there's two things we want to look at there. One is make sure that we still have the transit hub connection so that we can bring buses into the stations, even if there's new housing development. That'll help take passengers from the hills down to the station, as well as serve the new residential developments. The second is trying to find funding and working with BART to provide mitigations so that we can provide some hill service. And I know the hills are pretty tricky, both in El Cerrito and in Berkeley, with accommodating fixed route buses. So we can look at other solutions to fixed routes, whether it's demand response or some kind of shuttle type of service, but definitely in discussions with Bart on that. And that's something that they want to provide. And it will likely just be a cost of mitigation to these projects.
Thank you, Robert. This question came in on the Spanish line, and this is for the General Manager, Michael Hirsch. Are you planning to buy more double-decker buses?
Let me first thank our translators. What a difficult job they have. And the answer to this question is yes. We actually have authorization from our board to purchase 5 more double-decker buses. We have paused. Transbay ridership has plummeted, like 98% plummeted. And the double-deckers have very limited routes they can operate on. You have to have no low-hanging wires or branches or anything like that. And they can't go on normal community routes. So we have the authority. We are ready to pull the trigger, but we are going to wait and see what happens with Transbay ridership. We have enough capacity to obviously handle 15,000 daily riders. So as it comes back, we'll be prepared to add more double-decker buses.
Thank you, Mr. Hirsch. This is a question for our board directors, Directors Beckles and Peoples. What are you doing to restore service that was cut during the pandemic, particularly line 80 along Ashby Avenue that serves West Berkeley and the Ashby Bart station, the site of future transit-oriented housing? Let's start with Director Beckles and then Director Peoples.
Let's see, I'm just looking at that question. I received a letter that I believe staff, that was also CC to staff about this. So it seems to me that, the residents who rely on that service, this is an important line to restore. And so I'm hoping, and that's why I think I may defer to the district manager on this question, because I believe that as we restore service back to pre-pandemic services, that that sounds like that's a line that many of the residents are relying on. I'm reaching out for it. It seemed like I thought they had a lot of signatures, but it actually came. No, pardon me. What I'm looking at is actually a letter from the Berkeley City Council, the restoration of the 80 Ashby 6th Street bus line. And so it seems that, and this is just for those who may be listening, that the city council voted unanimously to send this letter to us asking for the service to be restored. And so I'm actually, I support that. And I think the question then goes to the general manager, is when can that happen, when we're seeing that the electeds who seem to be who are there to represent their constituents decided to send this letter to us because of the importance of it.
Yeah, let me comment. Restoring service takes 2 kinds of resources. It takes money and it takes operators. And we're doing everything we can to get money. I'm participating in a virtual this month, and I'm leading a team that's going to go talk to some of the legislators to try to get more money and to try to have the next reauthorization, which is a technicality, but it's non-pandemic money, include operating funding, which is very important for us. We tend to be okay on capital money. Operating money is a whole different question. I always at these talks and every place I can go, talk about what a wonderful place AC Transit is to work and encourage people to reach out to their networks and encourage people to apply to be operators and other employees at AC Transit so we can begin to build back some of that. Remember, everything at AC Transit is a zero-sum game. So if we put service somewhere we have to take it away from somewhere. And that's an issue that we always have to wrestle with. The people on the 80 have been very aggressive in asking for it to come back. But as Robert said, it's not a line that gets a whole lot of use. And so as part of the rework of the network, we're trying to get the 80 hooked into some transit node like Emeryville with all its shopping that will provide more ridership on that line. So, keep advocating for it, advocate for AC to get more money, get people to apply to be operators, and participate in the process when we redo the network. Thank you.
Thank you, Directors Beckel and Peoples. This is a question for CFO Chris Andrzejczyk, and this came in on the Spanish line. Can you transfer from Bart to AC Transit for free?
So let's see, let me think about this for a second. That's look at my, yes, we do have free. I'm sorry, my mind is blanking on this. I'm gonna have to pass this off.
The answer is no. We do have a program where you can get a discount when you transfer from from Bart to AC Transit, but that's only if you're using Clipper. We have a liaison committee between the AC Transit board and the Bart board, and we talk about this every once in a while. But it's again a question of who picks up the funding. And we've worked with Bart on that. We've worked with MTC on that. We will continue to do that, but it's not free.
And if I could add, Mike Hirsch, General Manager, we have an active study going on right now, led by MTC and Bart, called the Ferry Integration Study. In fact, the next meeting of the Ferry Integration Task Force is Monday at 1:30. It's a Zoom meeting. You can find information on the MTC website. We hope to have that study wrapped up, I believe, September, October timeframe this year, spelling out what the options are to better integrate fare coordination and what the wins and the subtractions are, how much it costs, and what the pluses and minuses are. So follow the Fare Integration Task Force. We're working hard in this area, and there'll be more information later this year.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Robert Del Rosario and just first of all ask if he has anything to add to that, and then ask about, I have another question. Thank you for the masks, hand sanitizers, and inverse ventilation procedures. However, what is less convenient for me is that local bus stops have been eliminated, moved farther away from bus and BART intersections, more than 1,800 feet between stop signs. Why is that?
Yeah, great question. So our bus stop policy is to have bus stops that are 800 feet to 1,300 feet apart. As a general rule of thumb, we want them to be 1,000 feet apart. And we take that pretty seriously in trying to comply to that. There are certain situations where it's just not possible, not physically possible to put in bus stops any closer. But there are certain situations such as Tempo BRT where we did space the bus stops a little further apart. We were very surgical about determining where these bus stops were going to be located. And we made sure they were still in the locations where they garnered a lot of ridership. And that's really one of the keys to having good transit service. It's that trade-off between accessibility, having a number of bus stops, but also making sure that the bus can keep going and not have to stop every block. So we try to keep to our policy of 800 to 1,300 feet. And anywhere that we're closer, we do look at removing a bus stop or spreading the bus stops further apart so that the buses can move more reliably.
Thank you, Robert. And this is a question for Chris Andrzejczyk. How much of AC Transit is paid for by bus fares that people pay to get on the bus?
Thank you, Beverly. And this one I do know the answer to. We get about somewhere between 10 and 15% of our operating funds from people paying fares on the bus. That is, maybe about average for companies that public transit agencies that run bus service. And it means that we get, the most of our revenues, most of the money we use to operate from other sources, sales taxes, property tax, parcel tax, things I mentioned before during my speech.
Thank you, Chris. Now let's open up the floor to those calling into the Zoom phone lines. We'll take 2 questions from the phone lines. Tammy will assist with releasing the first caller so he or she can unmute and ask their question. Tammy?
We have nobody calling in on the phone with a hand up at this time.
Thank you, Tammy. We will now take 2 other questions from the Spanish phone line.
Good evening.
Chantal?
Good evening. We have no questions from the Spanish interpretation line.
Thank you, Chantal. We will now take 2 questions from the Chinese phone line. Stephen Jones?
Hi, good evening. There's no questions tonight from the Chinese interpretation line.
Thank you, Stephen. Now it's 7:21, and we want to make sure that we end on time. So we will begin our closing remarks, and we'll ask for closing remarks from Director Beckles and then Director Peoples, and then we will tell you how you can keep in touch with us. Director Beckles?
Yes. Well, thank you. I really want to once again thank everyone who showed up tonight. Thank you very much for your questions. It seems that we may not have gotten to some of them, but please do, send those questions if you felt that we didn't have time to get to them. Please send them to me, to the staff, because I think that everyone who did take the time to send in a question should definitely have an answer to your questions. But thank you all for coming, for your feedback, for your questions. I do want to also thank staff for all the work that went into this, for you all for making this what I believe is a very successful forum. We really got a chance to to see that the public really that this is an issue that's important to them, with regard to the questions that we saw, your comments. We want to restore services as fast as possible. As Director Peoples mentioned, money is a factor, employees are a factor. So by all means, if you or someone could use a good paying union job, by all means, please do go online and fill out an application. And as you also heard, money is also a factor. There are so many ways that your advocacy makes a difference to those who are holding the power to releasing those funds. Thank you once again for all that you all do. Staff, thank you so much. Thanks for coming. And I welcome all of your feedback offline and comments and questions as well. And it truly is an honor to be able to serve this ward.
Thank you, Director Beckles. Director Peoples?
Yes, good evening. And I can sort of echo everything Jovanka said. Thank you all for coming. I think we had very excellent questions tonight, and I think we had more electeds on the Zoom meeting tonight than we've had in the past. Bev has up. I would urge you to stay connected with your local jurisdictions because, as Robert pointed out, we operate on the local jurisdiction streets. The street furniture, the benches and shelters and all that, that's all controlled by the local jurisdictions. And so if you can help us coordinate with the local jurisdictions, that's a good thing to do. And if you've got the time and inclination, get involved in some of the groups that are advocating for us at NTC and up in Sacramento and in Washington, DC. There are a number of newer groups that are involved with that, and that's a very useful thing to do. So thank you for coming, and I want to thank the staff. These meetings have been excellent, and I know they've taken a huge amount of work. And I want to echo General Manager Hirsch's commendations for all our frontline workers. For 14 months, they've been out there in the public, in the virus, in everything else, providing transportation primarily for essential workers. And as you saw the stats, primarily for people of color. So thank you and good evening.
Thank you. Now, we might have 2 more minutes, so I'm going to try to get one last question in there for our planning director, Robert Del Rosario, about service between El Sobrante and Oakland. I commute from El Sobrante to Oakland, and I gave up on AC Transit due to a 40-minute ride to Bart in the morning and infrequent service at night. That means I don't get home until 8:30 or 9. This wasn't true when you provided service from El Sobrante to Orinda Bart, which was cut despite community petitions and appeals at meeting. Are we ever going to get real service to our area? Robert?
Yeah, great question. So I do remember the service line 74 when we extended it down to Orinda Bart. That was grant funded, I believe, by the Air District at the time. And we weren't able to meet, ridership was okay from what I recall, but I don't think we were able to meet the requirements of the grant, and therefore we lost the funding for that service. Orinda it's out of our service area. I think we're more interested in concentrating our services from El Cerrito to travel towards more of the urban core, towards Richmond, and also towards El Cerrito, where folks from El Albany can take the bus and connect to other services that way. But I would encourage, as Director Peoples mentioned, to bring these comments up as we start to develop a new network, and then we can look at these things and other comments when we develop that new network in 2022, as of course we will continue to increase service and bring back restored service as resources allow before then.
Thank you, Robert, and thank you to our audience for joining us this evening for Transit Talks. We appreciate you taking the time. For those of you on Zoom, you will have the opportunity to take a satisfaction survey upon leaving the Zoom. We encourage you all to please stay engaged with us. Send us your comments and feedback via any of the following methods. You can go to the website. There's an email address. There are phone lines in English, Chinese, and Spanish. You can also mail things to us via U.S. Postal Mail Service. This concludes our Transit Talk series. Good night, everyone, and thank you.